Good evening, everybody. The meeting is called to order for the county board at 6:30. All right, everybody in their seats. A roll call, please.
Harkey,
Here.
Jay. Here. Kibler. Maxwell. Here. McGuire. Here. Michaels. Here. Mitchell.
Here.
Quisenberry. Here. Rosales.
Here.
Schrader. Schwartz. Shore. Weibel. Alex. Here. Anderson. Berkson. Here. Carter. Cowart. Esri.
Here.
Harper. Harrison.
Here.
Petrie.
Present. This evening, our reading or prayer will be done by Max Mitchell.
Our dear Heavenly Father, as we remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for the freedoms we enjoy every day, we think of how they have followed in the footsteps of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ. Please hold our servicemen and women in your strong arms. Cover them with your sheltering grace and your presence as they stand in the gap for our protection. We also remember the families of our troops. We ask for your unique blessing to fill their homes, and we pray your peace, provision, and the strength we fill our lives. May the members of our armed forces be supplied with courage to face each day, and may they trust in the Lord's mighty power to accomplish each task. Let our military brothers and sisters feel our love and support. In our name, in the name of Jesus, amen.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Next, Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk please read the notice of the meeting?
Notice is hereby given that a regular meeting of the County Board, Champaign County, Illinois, will convene on May 21st, 2015 at 6:30 p.m. in the Wild Shields Meeting Room, Brookins Administrative Center, 1776 East Washington Street, Urbana, Illinois, in said county for the purpose of allowing and ordering payments of claims against the county, receiving and acting upon reports of committees and such other matters as may be brought before said meeting, which said meeting shall continue in session from day to day until the completion of said business.
Thank you very much. Motion to approve the addenda and agenda. Thank you, Mr. Shore. Mr. Esri, thank you very much. Any comments on the agenda and the addenda? I'm asking to remove items 13B. No, I'm sorry.
16A and B.
It's 16A and B from the agenda. It's on your addendum. All right, any others? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much. Reading into the record the upcoming meetings that we have with the county board. The County Facility Committee meeting will be 2nd of June at 6:30 p.m. here in the Shields Room. The Environmental and Land Use Committee meeting is the 4th of June, again here in the Shields Room at 6:30. And Highway and Transportation Committee meeting is the 5th of June at 9 a.m., and that is held at the Highway Building. The Committee of the Whole will be meeting on the 9th of June at 6:30, again in the Shields Room, and the County Board will be meeting on the 26th of May as a special facilities meeting for the full County Board, and that will be at 6 p.m. in the Shields Room. And then on Thursday, the 18th of June, the County Board will be having the regular meeting in the Shields Room, and that's at 6:30. So note that the special meeting for facilities is at 6 p.m. All right, next, public participation. Just to remind people maybe who are new to our procedures here at the county board, we hold an hour for public participation, and each participant has 5 minutes to speak. And we have a clock that you can see on any of the screens showing the countdown from 5 minutes to when your time is up. The first person is Dorothy Vera Weiss.
Good evening, and thank you very much again for the opportunity to speak. My name
Okay.
is,
I know, sorry to interrupt you, and
okay.
it won't be counted against you. We just realized that later presentation is already loaded. Oh, it's your presentation? Oh, okay. We'll time you then. I thought it was a later presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm Dorothy Bureau-Weiss, and I realized that it was about 2 years ago that the Community Justice Task Force made its recommendations to this group about how to make improvements in the criminal justice system in Champaign County. The task force included Astrid Berkson and other members of the board, as well as community members. And they made a number of important suggestions for both improving the system, finding ways to make it more cost-effective, and potentially decreasing the number of people in jail. As I went over it, I decided that I would use really basic symbols for how things were going with the 10 different recommendations. And this is based on what I, as an interested community member, could find. There may be more specific information available. So the first recommendation was to integrate restorative justice principles throughout the justice system. And this is already being used in juvenile justice. It was recommended that it be expanded into the adult system. As far as I could tell, there wasn't any progress on this yet in 2 years. Second recommendation was to expand pretrial services into a comprehensive pretrial services program to avoid unnecessarily incarcerating people not convicted of a crime. Now, the county funded a program for pretrial assessment, but it was canceled after 5 weeks, so this counts as no progress. The third recommendation is a very complicated one, to develop a comprehensive behavioral health system of care that avoids incarceration, reduces recidivism, and promotes rehabilitation for persons with mental health and substance use disorders. That was the task force's title for this one. And there's been a lot of progress on this one. Stakeholder meetings have been held. A group has visited Peoria, which has a program, and Leon Evans was brought here for consultation. In addition, several grant applications are pending. So this one has had some progress. The fourth recommendation was to expand community sanctions to include a full range of community-based diversion, deferred adjudication, and sentencing options. The examples of this would be restorative sentences, a day reporting center so people wouldn't have to be housed in the jail, but would still have some forms of punishment and education, and electronic monitoring expansion. No known progress on this one. Fifth recommendation has had good success. This was to establish a reentry program for people returning to the community after completing a sentence in the Illinois Department of Corrections prison. And the county funding program is going into its second year. A reentry council has been established, and more than 100 clients have been seen. So actually, devoting some county money to this has made a big difference. A community-initiated volunteer program is also in early stages. So you can see this one does get a positive mark. The sixth recommendation was to identify and acquire adequate funds to implement best practice services and community sanctions. The task force recommended that the proportion of the public safety sales tax that would be devoted to preventive programs and community services should be increased from 5% to 30% or more, and this has not been done. There have been a few grant applications submitted which are pending. Seventh recommendation was to create a coordinating council to do the planning and to coordinate steps to reduce recidivism here, to further restorative justice and ensure the criminal justice system operates both effectively and cost-effectively. Hasn't been done, but just a side note, if the coordinating council were established, it would provide a much more sophisticated assessment of progress than this presentation that I'm doing this evening. Eighth recommendation was to form a racial justice task force to identify measures needed to address the disproportionate number of African Americans in the county jail. The estimated cost for this annually would be about $12,000, which is quite modest. There's no known progress on this recommendation. Ninth recommendation was to collect data, set performance standards, and measure outcomes that would enable programs to meet their goals, be more cost-effective, and be more successful in reducing recidivism. Data aren't routinely collected in formats that can be used for planning purposes, and that they need some IT improvements. But there has not been any definite progress on this. And the final recommendation was to provide training and public engagement opportunities to further the systemic improvements in the criminal justice system. And again, no known progress on it. So in summary, if you got a report card from your kids that looked like this, you wouldn't be very happy. But that doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. I've learned that the MacArthur Foundation grant that the county applied for was not obtained, but nevertheless, a lot of progress was made in putting that application together. And I think that if the county could go ahead and continue the planning process and encourage the people involved to keep working on it and to provide whatever funding is needed to keep that going, I would suggest that that be continued. And then second, to have at least one small, specific, concrete step. The Community Justice Task Force had recommended that a racial justice task force be established at an annual cost of about $12,000 just for staffing it and, I suppose, supplies and printing. And I'd suggest that that also be done to begin to make a little bit more progress on these excellent recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ron Coster. Does the clock work now? Yeah, okay. The clock is working now for you.
Awesome, thanks. My name is Ron Kester. I live at 1209 West Oregon in Urbana. I wanted to talk a little bit about the jailing issue. I know you're going to have an important decision this evening about this issue, about taking the next step toward funding it. And I wanted to report back on the Facilities Committee where this proposal was passed on May 5th and talk about some of the takeaways I had from that meeting and some things I'd like for you to consider tonight while you're deliberating about this. The first was something that I think about half the people on the committee said in so many words during the course of that meeting, and the question was, should we be spending $340,000 on schematics if we know that we can't spend money on the building project itself? Now, you'll notice that's a rhetorical question. The whole point was, why are we spending money when we know we don't have the money to fund this and the public will doesn't exist to fund this project? So I'd like for you to consider tonight this as a really great opportunity to shelve this proposal and say, this isn't the right year for this proposal. Maybe in a couple of years we'll be in a better financial position to consider it, but between now and then, maybe we'll have new opportunities present themselves to us. And I think the speaker before me presented a lot of opportunities for that. The second takeaway point I had from the Facilities Committee meeting earlier this month was a comment that was made by several people that really struck me as important, and that this is more than a facilities issue, it's part of a larger problem of criminal justice in the county. And I think I was really heartened by that comment because if we were to roll the clock back 2 or 3 years, we would have heard from several county board members almost exactly the opposite statement. People were coming forward and saying, this is just a building issue, this is not a policy issue, let's stick to the building proposal. And I want to congratulate the county board on actually embracing that complexity and looking at all these policy issues that go along with it. It's a much more difficult task, and you've taken this on, and we've seen a lot of good ideas come up as a result of it. I would like to add a third idea to those 2 ideas while you're deliberating about this decision tonight. And I think that idea is that we don't really know the true jailing needs of our county at this point. And the reason why we don't know the true jailing needs of our county at this point is that for the last several years, we've seen so many great proposals for programming that would reduce incarceration be put forward on our desk to consider. All right, these are programs that have worked in other counties, and we think they could work in our county as well. But as the previous speaker pointed out, hardly any of those programs have been tried yet. It's almost like we had a lot of really good ideas put forward by smart, expert, dedicated people, and then we said, thank you very much, let's go back to the building proposal. So if we put the building proposal to the side tonight, which I hope you do, then what I'd like to do is see the next step be, let's talk about programming and being able to reduce incarceration between now and the time that we approach this subject again when we're in a better fiscal position to do so. So let me talk a little bit about what that might mean. If I had my wish, of all these programs that we just reviewed, the one that I would start with would be the formation of a coordinating council to oversee all of this. Because in the same way that the county right now is auditing their maintenance needs for their buildings to try to establish a priority, what we really need right now is a good group of people to come together and say, let's look at all these programs that we see in front of us right now, let's examine where we are with them, and let's talk about a priority list. One that we can afford, and one that the county really wants to get behind and put their shoulder into, so that we can find that momentum to go forward with it. And if I had my way, some of the programs that we would start with right away would be to reintroduce the pretrial services program in a way that can be implemented, because to me, in looking at other counties, that's the very quickest way to reduce the incarcerated population, is to look at those policies that put people in jail. The second one is the Racial Justice Task Force. And to me, I feel like a real passion about that, because there's no doubt that the data is in, and we have a big problem with the disproportionate number of people of color who are incarcerated in our jail. We've known this for decades, and yet we haven't even gotten to the point where we can invite stakeholders to the table to talk about that as a policy priority. So I'd love to move forward with that too, and it seems like the price tag is a whole lot less than the $430,000 we're considering for the schematics plan. And then finally, the restorative justice piece seems like a really important part of that whole plan. And it's an important piece because not only do we reduce the jail population and we unencumber the criminal justice courts, but we also send people back into the community with a lot of positive feeling about what the criminal justice system can do for us in a personal way. I'd like to end by sort of bringing to light a comment that I've heard before about this issue, and that comment is, we can't program our way out of the jailing issue. And I want to push back on that a little bit by noticing that in 1970 and 1980, the rate of incarceration for Champaign County was dramatically lower than what it is now. In 1970, I think we had about 1/6 of the jailing capacity that we do now. In 1980, it was like 1/4. So it's a matter of policy changes that we're looking at, and I think programming can bring us to that place. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next is Christina Clark.
Good evening. This is my first time here, so I really hope that everyone will at least give me this one opportunity and not shut down by the things I have to say and kind of listen from your heart. I would really appreciate it. My name is Christina Clark Kahn. I'm a community activist and organizer originally from Washington, D.C., and I have been that for the past 17 years. I'm here tonight to remind the board members that represent our community about the crucial need to focus on racial justice as one of, if not the most important component of criminal justice reform in Champaign County. While I see the recent applications for various grants as potential to begin examining our criminal justice system as a whole, the fact remains, and this is the most recent statistic, that 67% of the people in your jails are African American, even though they account for 13% of the population of our county. 91% of jaywalking citations in Urbana were issued to African Americans. Local police stop African American drivers at twice the rate they stop white drivers, give out trespassing notices to higher rates of African Americans on campus, and the list goes on. While national violent crime rates among African Americans continues to decline, the rates of arrest and incarceration does not. And it is proven fact that when jails are built, they are filled. Who will we fill new jail cells with in Champaign County? The answer is our Black brothers and sisters. I cannot educate the board tonight on why mass incarceration is now termed the new Jim Crow. I can't lay out a whole detailed plan of how to cure our justice system of bias. There's not nearly enough time for that. We cannot be expected to sum up complex issues in a few sound bites.
This is why I would like to emphasize self-education. This is something that was told to me 10 years ago, and it was hard to hear for me, and this is why I'm giving it to you. We must learn how the issues of racism, poverty, and police violence are connected. We all have a responsibility to educate ourselves on how pervasive and ingrained racism is in the institutions that we view as just. I would further argue that those who make decisions that greatly affect communities of color have an even greater responsibility to not only educate themselves, but to also build trusting relationships and establish ongoing dialogue with such affected communities. Whether the whole of Champaign County will thrive or not depends largely on decisions that are made in this room. I strongly believe that it is both inappropriate and unacceptable to even discuss more jail construction while at the same time completely ignoring the very obvious and proven racial disparity that exists in Champaign County's criminal justice system. From discipline in our schools, interactions with police on our streets, in courtrooms, and in your jails, all data which we have, by the way. Simply put, if we continue to try to cure social ills with jail construction, we will continue to uphold a system of white supremacy. A new civil rights movement is building and growing in the United States. Everyone must see that on their Facebook feed every day, all day long. And this issue is not going to disappear anytime soon. Our county experiences racism and poverty in many of the same ways that Baltimore, Ferguson, Chicago, and New York do. But Champaign County doesn't have to be a victim of state violence against African Americans and poor communities. Instead, we can step up and become a community that shows it has a sincere commitment to racial justice. We have such a unique opportunity to rearrange our priorities and make Champaign County a leader of significant criminal justice reform, whether or not we are awarded a grant. There are a lot of ways this can happen. You have a lot of knowledgeable people at your disposal in this town, and this isn't about party lines. I'm outside of all party lines talking to you right now. All of us are responsible for interrupting this ineffective, expensive, and oppressive cycle of abuse against communities of color. It's not enough for people in positions of influence and authority to say, well, I'm not racist. I'm not racist. Or the even more pernicious, I don't see color. People with decision-making power in society have even more of a responsibility to educate themselves on these issues and to face the reality of historical, systemic, and continuing injustice. So without this conscious, courageous, and critical emphasis on racial and economic justice, criminal justice will continue to be nothing more than a bludgeon that the privileged use to beat down the underprivileged. We need to spend our resources on programs, not jails. Strongly consider a study session together. And I am willing to be approached with any kind of information that you would like. If you don't know where to start, I'm willing to help you find a place to start. I just ask you to please stop ignoring racial disparity in our county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Frank Rubenacker.
Yeah, this is my first time also. This is about the resolution, PLA resolution for next month's meeting. It seems like there was a misunderstanding. This resolution wasn't brought up to try to hurt the non-union or the minorities in this county. It was brought up to help them. The higher your wages, the better wages you get, the more money you have to spend. We're not there to hurt anyone. We just want to make it better for everybody in this county. So I don't know in the newspaper where it got that we're out to go after everybody that's non-union and minorities and try to hurt them. We're not. We're trying to help this county and make it a good county to live in. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Monica Torando.
Hi, my name is Monica Trando. I was here a couple weeks ago to speak about PLAs as well. And to kind of piggyback off of what the gentleman just said, we're not here to hurt people. We're here to help. I just heard a story, and hopefully I'm not stealing what someone else is going to say, but there are non-union people who come to the unions and want to organize because they will get a better wage and some training sometimes. We don't deny them that opportunity. We try to help them with that. And one gentleman just told me that a non-union person came to the union hall wanting to organize and actually got a raise out of it when he went back to his employer and told him what he would make if he became union. So he may not have become union, but unions definitely helped him make a better living and make a better environment for his family and provide for them. I don't know if I did this when I got up from the last meeting, is I wanted to thank all of the board members for letting me speak last minute as they did. It meant a lot to me, and I thank all of you. I know I got to thank a few of you individually, but I wanted to make a point to thank all of you. I also wanted to address something that when the board started to speak back to us, I think some of my comments were taken out of context, and I would like to clear some of those up. I wasn't trying to finger point between union and non-union and say who was skilled and who wasn't. I'm encouraging that potentially in a PLA, you put something in it about vetting these companies, making sure they can do the jobs they say they can, that their workers are from where they say they are, and keep that money local and help to afford more projects down the road when you tax these people. Also, I wanted to address an issue that was brought up about unions do not affect the economy. I can't disagree more with that. I haven't done my due diligence. I don't have numbers to put out there. But if you are raising tax rates and people are not earning a living wage, how do you expect that tax rate for them to be able to pay for it? Unions help raise wages. They help perform, they encourage an environment of competition. I don't see how that is a bad thing. Case in point, my father worked for Caterpillar, UAW, many years, Boilermaker as well. Caterpillar was making record profits. They outsourced my father's job, knocked him down from a $40 an hour job to a $20 an hour job. That wasn't good enough. They hire some kid off the street at $8 an hour. He eventually just retired. He was tired of it. Caterpillar kept getting profit gains quarter after quarter, but they can't pay my dad, who had 4 mouths to feed at home. They just kept outsourcing. We need to save money. We need to increase our profits. We need to keep giving that to the CEOs. Help people in this community make a living wage. Help them, help the community, the county, when they raise their taxes to pay for some of these projects. Keep these people working. Also, lastly, I just wanted to encourage, I heard a lot of people throwing out numbers and studies and everything else. In order for there to be some kind of transparency, please cite your sources. I heard a URL being thrown out of a source and a few other things. I'd like to kind of look these things up too. I went to grad school. I was told by my advisor the first week of grad school, your numbers are only as good as the sources you get them from. If there's biases, you've got to be aware of that. You don't want to report something that isn't true. I'm not trying to make a battle out of this. I want to better inform myself and hopefully open up discussions between more people. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming again this evening. So far, the last speaker for the evening is Kevin Sage. If others would like to speak after Mr. Sage, be sure to bring up a white slip so you'll be recognized.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everybody on the board here for letting me speak. I wanted to speak about an agreement with labor also. On June 3rd, 2011, Peter Phillips, he's a professor and chair of the economics department at the University of Utah. He testified before the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Subcommittee on Technology, Information Policy, Intergovernmental Relations, and Procurement Reform. He said, quote, allowing contractors on public works to use PLAs, but prohibiting the government from doing so takes the government's interests out of the game. For instance, the government may be interested in local, veteran, or minority hire, or the development of construction careers, for disadvantaged workers, while the contractor conceivably could care less. Disallowing the government from using PLAs robs the taxpayer of the ability to harvest the full value of their tax dollars, takes the government out of the picture, and confers the value of an asset the government owns to the general contractor. PLAs need not give the unions or union contractors sole access to the owner's work. In the public sector, PLAs permit non-union contractors to bid on the work. Government PLAs typically permit non-union contractors to bring key employees onto the project independent of union hiring halls. PLAs can set aside some work for minority contractors, and some of the work can be set outside the PLA. PLAs are flexible and create labor procurement contracts that bend to the needs of the specific projects. Dr. Phillips continues on and cites many studies with empirical data. He ends by saying, quote, "To deny government access to this tool prevents the government from representing itself in its own best interest." I'd be happy to provide the board with a transcript of the full testimony as well, if anybody would like it. Can I bring you a copy?
Yes, please do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Should I just pass it around?
Thank you very much. Mr. Ammons, you wish to speak?
Yes.
All right.
So I too am going to speak to the PLAs, and I spoke to this last time as well. And I want to make sure that a couple of things are very clear that about the project labor agreements from my perspective. I do support labor, and I support the initiative to have a project labor agreement. But I want those agreements to have language and goals that ensure that fair percentages of African Americans will be a part of the workforce, as well as have opportunities for Black-owned businesses to participate in those, in the contracts or the, whatever it is that are put forth by the county, whatever projects are being put forth. I know that this is going to be a sensitive discussion as it goes through for everyone. And so I wanted to make sure that a couple of things were clear, that it is not my intention in any way, shape, or form to infer, suggest, directly say that anyone involved at the heads of the labor organizations, Matt Langendorf, any of them are racist. That is not my intentions. That is not what I am saying. And I feel like I need to make that clear and make it part of the public record, because I am very clear nowadays that people hear sometimes not exactly what you said, but something that they heard or they want to hear, right? Or they're defensive about something. And I can see how this would cause such a response in some people, given the history of the trade unions and the history and the actual numbers that exist still today. So I don't want to stop or to interfere with the county board trying to do your business or any of that. The only thing that I'm speaking to when I come here is about the language, about the goals in relationship to the project labor agreements. That's it. Trying to change and address the numbers of people or African Americans or whoever who are in the trade unions is not a job that is your responsibility. Matt and I are going to wrestle about that. Right, Matt? So I just really want to make that clear, but I want to connect now in the last couple of minutes here, the initial conversation to this conversation. When I look at the unemployment rates, when I look at the benefits that that tradesmen, men and women, receive from working union jobs, not even the skilled trades necessary, but I consider my cleaning that I do at the University a skill, so I'm not going to put myself outside of that. But I know what my employment at the university and within the unions, having a living wage and having benefits, what it meant for my life and the direction in which it helped me take my life so that I could be a more productive citizen in this community. And so I know that that's what it would mean for many other young men, especially African-American men and women who are trying to find their way, but they're still stuck in low-paying, low-wage jobs that don't offer opportunities for them. So if I'm just saying that when we put forth goals and initiatives that really focus to include them in job opportunities, in legitimate jobs, living wage jobs, we actually serve the function of public safety in doing so. So that's what I'm trying to raise here. We could really do wonders for some of the concerns that all of us have in our community by having a real strong focus and challenging the trades in particular to have a strong focus and increasing the numbers so that we can have those American dream opportunities that the Latino brothers spoke to last week when they were here. We all want that. And all I'm asking for is for an opportunity for those in my community in particular to share in that opportunity. So that's all that I'm asking for. And I appreciate the opportunity to share that, but I wanted to make sure those things were clear. I'm not trying to interfere in that regard. I just want some language and goals set that would actually change some of the things that we all see happening. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ammons. Last call for any others who would like to speak to the county board this evening. Seeing none, I will close public participation for this evening, and thanks to all of you who took time to come and speak to us this evening. A motion for the consent agenda. So moved. Second. Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry, and was that Mr. Harkey? Thank you. Any comments, any questions on the consent agenda? Those in favor, roll call.
Harkey,
Yes.
Jay,
The consent agenda requires 100% yes votes. So if there's something you want pulled off because you can't vote yes, then you need to request that that item be pulled off. Environmental land use 1 and 2. Okay. I'll second. Well, you don't need a second.
No, it just needs to be pulled. All right, anybody else want an item pulled from the consent agenda before we hold the vote? All right. Clerk, would you start again on the roll call vote?
Harkey,
Yes.
Jay, Maxwell, McGuire, Michaels, Mitchell, Quisenberry, Rosales, Shore, Alex, Bergson, Cowart, Esri,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Petrie.
Yes. The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Board communications. Excuse me, just a moment. Mr. Maxwell, go ahead.
I'd like to call to the folks' attention again the yellow memo, and attached thereto are the 3 submittals that we shortlisted and will be discussed next Tuesday. And I encourage you all to take those home, do your homework. I know you've got a lot of things you'd rather do, but we'd appreciate any consideration you can give those over the weekend. And be sure to bring those with you when you come to the meeting next Tuesday evening.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr. Maxwell. Ms. Michaels.
I just wanted to make a note that Mr. Anderson is out tonight because his son is graduating from St. Malachy's. So that's it.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to his son. Ms. Bergson.
Do these 2 things that were pulled from consent go on the regular agenda then?
Yes, that is correct. Mr. Esri will handle those when we get to the ELUC part of the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Esri. Any other comments, questions? All right, thank you. Motion to approve the minutes, and with your Consent, is it all right to omnibus all of the minutes, or do you prefer doing them individually?
Second.
All right, Mr. Harkey and Ms. Bergson. Any additions, corrections to the sets of minutes? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of approving these minutes signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, thank you. We have two presentations this evening. The first presentation is from the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Board. And Mr. Tracy, would you please step up? Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you for having me. I just, last night we had the Mental Health Board and the Developmental Disability Board's meetings, and we made our allocations for this current funding cycle, which begins July 1 and goes to June 30 of next year. There's a spreadsheet that you should all have. The top one is the Mental Health Board spreadsheet, and then the bottom one is the Developmental Disability Board. And I'll kind of explain and walk you through those and kind of tell you where we are related to different priorities, some of which were discussed by some of the people that provided public comment tonight. This is, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview. In all of the areas that my boards deal with, and that includes mental health, substance use disorders, and intellectual and developmental disabilities, we are in the midst of massive change, and we're also in the midst of massive fiscal problems. We also are in kind of an interesting place. We have some wonderful opportunities at this point. As you all know, Leon Evans was here a couple of weeks ago, and in Texas, even though they've done some wonderful things, they have not accepted the expansion of Medicaid, which we have here. And it's interesting that most of the people that are involved in the criminal justice system, that are, some of them have serious and persistent mental illness as well as homelessness and other related problems, those people all really have Medicaid and are assigned to managed care companies in Champaign County that are responsible for their care. And this gets into, this is really one of the pieces of the puzzle in coming up with a strategy, and we have a community coalition that's looking at this whole issue that the sheriff and I have been involved with. But at this point, the part of the puzzle is where do the hospitals and the healthcare providers come into play? And you know, if everyone has Medicaid now, why aren't we in a position where we can get behavioral health services, including substance use disorder services, for everybody, for all those people? This is especially another factor in this is that in 2008, the behavioral health parity law was passed. That's the Wellstone, I believe, Wellstone-Kennedy law in 2008. Just now, CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services, have issued some guidelines on what exactly does parity mean. Essentially, the thought is that anybody that has a behavioral health or mental health issue should have as good of access or parity to what you have on the physical health side. So the question becomes, with these managed care companies and the Medicaid clients, all of whom are the people that we're talking about that are involved with the criminal justice system, to what extent is parity going to have an impact and the changes in the rules? That said, on the developmental disability side, the changes really are more related to the concept of integration. All of there's been major CMS rule changes regarding Medicaid and developmental disabilities. It all has to do with integrating people with intellectual and developmental disabilities into the community. And the concept of the segregated programs, the sheltered workshops, the programs where people are segregated and have no access to community, in addition to being against the new Medicaid rules, they are against the Olmstead law. They bump up against the Americans with a Disability Act, all that statute. And the Justice Department is actually enforcing desegregation of those programs for people with disabilities. So this is really massive change. As you know, in our community, the primary provider operates a sheltered workshop. That is a thing of the past, and it's going to go away. And the transition is very painful for providers to make at this point, because it really represents a huge paradigm shift. And that I wanted to mention that when we made our funding decisions related to developmental disabilities last night, we looked at everything through the lens of integration. And the contracts are going to be negotiated with specific milestones that we're going to be looking for related to, or benchmarks, to how they plan to move us to the system that it's supposed to be within 5 years. I mean, that's basically the window that the feds are talking about at this point. On the mental health board side, if you look at the spreadsheet that you have, if you look at the column on the right, and I think I highlighted those, it says 2016 approval. All of those numbers in that column on the right are what were approved, and it represents about $3.3 million worth of programs and services. If you go over to the column on the left, those are the agencies that we fund. The programs that we fund are the next column over, which is titled Program. Tier 1, these above the line are the programs that we have that have something to do with behavioral health services for people that are in the adult criminal justice system. At this point, we have approved a lot of the programs because, as you know, the planning program is still going on. And so the proviso that we are going to include in the contracting is that we will have language in the contracting that as the planning for a reception center and for improved services to divert people with mental illness and substance abuse disorders from the jail, that those programs will be subject to redirection of effort, or we will eliminate them and use the money for another purpose. So that'll be language that's going to be in the contract. One of the things that everybody that I've talked to that has been involved in the planning process has mentioned is that there really is the need to have a place, a physical location, what Leon Evans referred to as a restoration center, but a location where people that are picked up by the police or are in crisis can go to rather than the jail. And so that's something that I think that the Mental Health Board is very interested in. And I think that actually we may be able to help with when we, again, get to the point in the planning process where we know exactly what we want. And I think that we can do that by virtue of a relationship that we've established with the PNC Bank Community Development Office. That, as you know, we've been purchasing community integrated living arrangements for people with intellectual disabilities. We have, at this point, 2 homes, but PNC Bank, in an initial conversation with them, said that they would, that something like a reception center is something that they would be interested in, the possibility of either loaning us money to buy an existing facility and rehab it, or build a new facility. But anyway, that's, and as you know, we've gone to Peoria. We looked at the facility in Peoria. I'm kind of thinking that given the size of of our cities, that what they have in Peoria is probably similar to what we need here. So that of course is not on here, but I wanted you to know that we are thinking about that, and we're prepared to bring that to the table as part of the planning process. If you go to the bottom of level of Tier 1, these are the programs that are related to our juvenile services. And that is our Parenting with Love and Limits programs that we fund through Prairie Center, and it's now Centerstone since they have merged at this point. And we also have a PLL program that we fund at Community Elements. Tier 2 is basically all down in that the bottom part of the sheet. And those are the programs that are related to the Access Initiative, which by the way, one of the persons that was talking about public participation mentioned the importance of addressing racial justice. This is a program that really does address racial justice related to people, primarily kids and families. We just had the final site visit from the feds last week, and we haven't gotten the final report, but just to give you something that they said, we have one of only 2 programs in the country that are focused on African-American youth and their families. The reviewer commented that the voice of African-American families and youth is typically marginalized, and there are huge trust issues in communities, and they thought that we have done more here to engage families and youth, African-American families and youth, and involve them in the process, and to listen to the youth and family voice, and the engagement, we got a lot of positive comments on that. So those programs in Tier 2 are the programs that we have to continue those elements of the Access Initiative, which ends on September 30th of this year. That's when the contract with the cooperative agreement with the feds and with DHS ends. So that's Tier 2. Tier 3 are the programs that we fund that relate to developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities. As you know, the Mental Health Board and the Developmental Disability Board are autonomous boards. And we have, I'm the executive director of both, and what governs the relationship between these 2 boards is a intergovernmental agreement. And one of the provisions of the agreement is that the Mental Health Board has to assign a specific percentage of its funding to support intellectual and developmental disabilities. And that is actually what Tier 3 recommends. That's what that column is. And again, part of the the intergovernmental agreement between the 2 boards is that we do integrated planning. So the decisions about which ones are recommended by the Mental Health Board have also been were recommended by the Developmental Disability Board also. Tier 4, all of those listed there are other types of mental health programs that relate to either adults, which are primarily the ones above the line, and then at the bottom are primarily ones that are associated with children. These tend to be, I won't call them lower priority programs, but they are programs that are not as well aligned with our priorities as the programs that are in Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 5 represents programs that where we had requests for funding that we did not approve. And so you can see what those are. If you flip over to the next page, this is the Developmental Disabilities Board. And the column that says approved, just so you could see where the Mental Health Board fits in, those are the far right-hand column. The next column over from the right are the programs and services that were approved by the Developmental Disability Board last night. And as you can see, the total is about $3.7 million, $3.65 million for both boards. We did defer on one. That is the United Cerebral Palsy Land of Lincoln application, and the board wanted additional information before making a decision, so that's deferred to the June meeting. So that there is kind of in a nutshell what was decided last night, and tried to give you a little bit of context of what's going on in this very fluid situation that we're in, both with funding and policy changes from the feds and the state.
Okay, thank you very much. First, let me ask our county board member who is on the mental health board if Ms. Bergson would like to add anything to what Mr. Tracy conveyed. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Maxwell, did I see your hand for a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you. Couple of things. Peter, on the PNC Bank and the possibility of finding a place for an adult assessment center, I think that's interesting. I know you've done it with the SILAs. Have you done a good deal of legal vetting of these things to make sure that you're 100% okay?
Well, we're 100% okay that we have the authority to do it. I have not done any kind of vetting of this process. The conversation with the bank was just in general terms to see if this was something that fit into what their community development branch. But the statute allows the mental health board to buy property. The developmental disability board does not have that specifically in their statute.
So in other words, if you do buy this, it would be completely contained within mental health board, and there's no way that a future responsibility for the excess or the drop-off center could then revert or could come back to cause liability on the part of the full county board.
Well, that's part of the legal vetting that would need to be done, Gary. We wouldn't be running the center. I think the idea would be that if we bought a center, we would be contracting with someone to run the center. And as we do with all of our contracts, we have extensive hold harmless and liability language in the contracts that makes it clear that we are not the service provider and that the service provider is responsible. The service provider also has to carry malpractice insurance and other kinds of liability insurance. So I would see it as similar, but clearly there would be, and we would have to do quite a lot of legal research to make sure. And that would be something. This is much bigger than a SILA, and so I think this would be something that if we went in this direction, that we would have to work very closely with county administration and state's attorney and to see how best that we could manage that.
I appreciate at least you've done a little forward thinking, and that we may have to expand to make sure that this is a freestanding within the mental health board and not come back and force responsibility upon the county.
We certainly wouldn't want that.
Yeah, I appreciate
for
that.
ourselves either.
And if I have maybe one other question, I noticed that the quarter-cent safety sales tax is still going to go through the mental health board, at least what you're proposing.
I apologize, I forgot to mention that. We made a recommendation to the county board, and I sent that to Deb Busey this morning, that this RP, the Regional Planning Commission Youth Assessment Center, should be funded. And this was predicated on the decision, the review of the application by the, what we call the quarter-cent administration team, which includes the state's attorney, court services, a variety of people that are from the county. So, at this point, the money is in your hands, and we're recommending that we go ahead with it, and we're willing to do the programmatic oversight of the thing. At this point, the memorandum of understanding is still in effect. I think we've been talking about the possibility of changing some of the language, and that's still something that needs to be finalized.
Thank you.
Are all your questions answered, Mr. Maxwell? Okay, Mr. Harkey.
Yeah, when we worry about liability for this program or this building falling back on the county, let's remember that the goal of this is to keep people from going into the county jail, because when people are arrested, that liability does fall on the county to put them into jail rather than having a resource like this. So whenever we think about where ultimate liability lies, let's remember that the goal of this is to keep costs down at the county from incarcerating people. We'd rather treat them.
I agree completely.
Thank you, Mr. Harkey. Mr. Alex, did I see your hand?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Peter, thanks for being here. Just to clarify, you're essentially saying you believe that the Mental Health Board has the borrowing authority working with PNC to potentially purchase a building that could be used to house a adult assessment center. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, but there's no, you're not, in this budget that we're seeing, we're not actually allocating any money to do that purchase or to operate such a center at this time, is that right?
No, there is nothing
Okay.
in here for that purpose.
What type of a purchase arrangement would you have in mind then? Is this something where you're proposing to look at this in subsequent years and just want us to know that this is something that you have available as a tool? Or is it conceivable that the Mental Health Board would be able to act on providing at least the physical aspects of such a facility prior to June 30 of 2016?
Well, as I said, I think that the planning process is going to drive a lot of that discussion, and I guarantee you, we're not going to take any action without having a lot of conversation with the county board, and and you'll know what's going on because you're involved with that whole process of planning at this point.
Let's just
If
say
no
that-
one likes that idea, this is just something that is within the realm of our capacity at this point.
Let's just say that it happening too quickly is not something I'm concerned about.
Oh.
I would like to see it happen sooner rather than later, and I'm curious whether there are any options that the Mental Health Board sees to accelerate that process.
We could do it this year.
And that would be essentially by committing to execute the purchase this year and then allocate money to retire the debt in subsequent years. Is that what we're getting at here?
I think we would, it would depend on when in the year we were to purchase it, but the arrangement we have with them now is that when we've had to do rehab on the Scylla houses, so, just as an example, one place that I had, that we had looked at and the sheriff and I have talked about is that Urbana Care Center on North Lincoln.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I'm aware that those discussions have been taking place.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm obviously that, if that facility were to work, there would be considerable rehab involved, and so the cost during this current year would be very low because the interest wouldn't be very much. And so they've essentially given us a line of credit for the Scyllas, and we had actually set aside $100,000 for the Scyllas for the first year, and we're not going to spend anywhere close to that $100,000 because it just hasn't happened as quickly.
Okay, thank you. I see where you're going with that, and I just wanted to state, I think if anyone believes that the Mental Health Board is going to be able to purchase and operate such a facility on their own within their budget, they need to reconsider their opinion. Clearly, it would be great if the Mental Health Board could assist with the physical aspect of this facility and with operation, but I'm certainly aware that operating a facility like that's going to require funding from a wide variety of sources.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comment on the mental health proposal budgets? Okay, can we move to the developmental disabilities budget then?
I've
Well,
gone over it if anybody has
I
any
know,
questions.
I know you have,
Yeah.
but I wanted to ask Mr. Maxwell, who is our liaison to that board, if he had any comments on that meeting last evening, giving him a chance to do so.
Not any, I think I mainly asked the questions I would have asked related to this as well, so thank you.
Mr. Shore is also assigned. I don't.
That's correct, he is. Mr. Shore, do you have a few words of wisdom for us?
I think you did a very good job of summing it up. Thank you.
All right, any questions on the second sheet? Well, I have just one question. Looking at these numbers, have all of the 7+ million that goes to both the Mental Health Board and the Developmental Disabilities Board now been committed, or is some of it still uncommitted and waiting some final decisions?
All that we can afford has been committed. And as I said, there's the caveat that the contracts that we issue this year, that we're going to have that language in that I mentioned, so that if the planning process for the reception center requires some of that money, we will be willing to redirect it or reprogram it. Just for your information, tomorrow morning, we have a provider meeting that the sheriff has organized, and of course, we co-sponsor it. And my plan is to say, these are the resources we have, and I'm going to lay this right out on the table. And I think that has to be considered as part of the mix in terms of how we decide how we program for these folks. One of the things that I came away from Leon Evans's presentation with was his comment that we have a ethical and moral obligation to this population. These are people that die 25 years sooner than the general population, and when they die horrible deaths because they haven't been cared for. And so to the extent that, it sort of recentered my priorities, I really think that we have to address the needs of these, the serious and persistent mentally ill and the people that are substance abusers that that get into the criminal justice system.
Thank you very much. I agree, because I've mentioned that I'd like to see a pilot up and going within a year. So it'll be interesting how these things progress. The meeting tomorrow morning, is that such a meeting that if some county board members would like to sit in and listen, that is a possibility, or is it only for the providers, yourself and the sheriff, and I think it's Alan Jones also, is that correct?
Yes. Well, at this point, I know we have 35 people that are going to be there already, plus we have representatives from Carl and Presence that are going to be attending. That was another thing that we have done, and actually the sheriff took the lead on that. We've had meetings with both hospitals at this point, and obviously because of the Medicaid expansion and their obligations related to managed care, they're interested in talking. And the super utilizer group that the sheriff identified, the 47 people that have 5 or more jail occurrences during the course of a year, it's interesting to see that those same people pop up at both emergency departments at Carl and Presence. So, that's a good place to start. How do you case manage for those folks?
I agree, and I'd heard those statistics previously. It sounds like a full room, so then my request to you might be that one of you or several of you who have organized this maybe write up a short memo and let us know the progress that's being made when you have these provider meetings, just to keep us apprised of how things are moving along.
We will do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any last questions for Mr. Tracy? Oh, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Okay,
We
thank you all.
appreciate it. We have a second presentation this evening, Mr. Gima, who will be talking to us about the Champaign County Nursing Home and the quarterly report. Thank you for coming this evening.
Good evening, everyone. Excuse me. What I'm going to cover tonight, census.
Mr. Gima, can you hold on for a few minutes? Presently, we don't have a quorum. Thank you very much.
Can we have a 5-minute recess?
Yes, let's have a 5-minute recess and do it that way. Thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Quisenberry. Okay, the meeting is called back into order. It looks to me like it is 12 minutes to 8. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Hartke,
Here.
Jay. Here. Maxwell. Here. McGuire. Here. Michaels. Here. Mitchell. Here. Quisenberry. Here. Rosales.
Here.
Shore. Here. Alex. Bergson.
Here, Alex is here too.
Cowart. Esri.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Petrie.
Present, quorum is here. Mr. Gima, thank you very much for your patience. Would you please start your presentation?
Sorry. Census. So the census through April, you can see for this year, fiscal year, our census has been down in the first 4 months. What you see in May is not the average census, but the average daily census that we saw, I think, as of yesterday, which was 202. So the takeaway from that is that we have seen an increase in our census since late April. Roughly, I think the third week of April, we started to see an increase to where we're at, and we were at 202 today. So what we've been seeing with the census, and I would call this a cyclical stalemate over the last few months, is that the number of referrals that we have seen has been constant at roughly 40 to 45 a month. In the month of April, our referrals increased to, I believe, 55 for the month. And what we have seen is the quality of the referrals has not been where we could accept all of the referrals. And we're talking about individuals with behavioral issues, payer issues, are the main criteria for not accepting a referral. And we're pretty frank with the hospitals in terms of referrals of whether we're going to take them or not. So the average census to date is 191.9, and obviously we are behind where we were last year. And again, last year was the highest annual census that we've seen since they moved into the new building. And just very quickly, our VA census, we've been averaging just about 2 for the last few months. So from a financial position, despite the fact that our census has been down in the first quarter of this year, we're showing profitability with a net income for the first 3 months of the year at $110,000. When you add back depreciation, the cash that we should be generating from operations total was about $289,000. Now, obviously, I made the emphasis on should because we're going to talk about cash. So on the cash, you can see the bottom line, unfortunately, is our cash balance. And through the end of March, our cash balance has basically been running about $330,000 for the last 3 months. The April ending balance will be about the same. You know, on any given day during the month, we're fluctuating up and down by hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the takeaway from this is the cash balance that we have right now is very, very low. And it's not a position that I want to be in for the nursing home. And you can see the big reason why is our accounts receivable, which is the red line at the top. We are well over $5 million in receivables. Now, our payables, which is the middle line, shows that we've been pretty steady in paying our bills. Now, if we don't get more cash, the only option that we have is to slow down our payments to our vendors so that we can make sure we make payroll. So what is the number one issue that we have with cash? Previously, I've been talking about Medicaid applications, and that'll be on the next slide. But right now, over the last 2 months, and especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, the main issue has been trying to get paid by Health Alliance and Molina Healthcare with the growth of the dual-eligible managed care program that the state has started in 2014. So we have not received any payments by either of those payers since June. And in June, we had, I'm going to call just a sprinkle of payments from Health Alliance. And to date, we have not received a single payment from Molina Healthcare. So the enrollment figures, I could have put in there what our enrollment as of last summer was basically a couple of residents. So since the end of November, we have seen, relatively speaking, an exponential growth in the enrollment of our dual-eligible managed care program. And again, these individuals are passively enrolled, meaning that they will get enrolled into the program no matter what, unless they actively opt out. And again, you can see that by the beginning of this month, we have 39 of our Medicaid residents who are now in this managed care program. Our payer mix for Medicaid roughly is about 100 to 110. So we're getting close to, 35, close to 40% of our Medicaids are now in a managed care program. Now, the other half or so of our Medicaids, or not half, but a portion of them, are the Medicaid applications, of which we have about 50 to 55 of those currently open. So, but with the managed care, our receivables through the end of March totals $800,000. The monthly cash flow that we are not seeing, because we're not being paid, is roughly about $170,000 to $180,000. So if I added the receivables for the month of April, we're getting close to $1 million. If I add what the receivables are as of today, we're probably a little bit over $1 million. So this is the critical issue that we've been dealing with. And what I can tell you is we're making progress. Now, progress is not that we have seen a check just yet, but we have had numerous conversations with both organizations. I've gotten the associations involved. I have a contact directly with Healthcare and Family Services that has contacted both health plans on our behalf, meaning on behalf of Champaign County, to try to help expedite these things. We now have weekly conference calls with representatives from both managed care organizations. And in a conference call that we had with Health Alliance last week, Friday, their goal is that they're going to pay us the claims through March by the end of this month. Now, my hope is that we'll see half of that paid by the end of this month. But their goal is to try to get us paid through March claims by the end of this month.
Who was first? I'm sorry, Mr. Alex.
Scott, can you put some context around, you said something to the effect of they will try to get us paid. What does trying involve? I mean, is there a reason that these payments have been delayed? Are they contractually obligated to pay? Are they disputing the payment? Are they disputing the bills? What's the legal situation essentially that we're in here with these payments?
We have separate issues with both MCOs. With Health Alliance, they have been saying that they have not been receiving what's called a patient credit file from the state. The patient credit file basically says what is the Social Security check or the resident income portion of the Medicaid payment. So again, if Medicaid pays $5,000 a month, your Social Security check is $1,000, Health Alliance only has to pay us $4,000. Now, the state says that all the MCOs are receiving this patient credit file on a monthly basis. But Health Alliance has said to date, up until probably the end of April, that they have not been receiving that information, and that's the reason why they have not been paying us. So my conclusion is I'm not getting a straight story. All I know is I'm not getting paid. What Health Alliance has said as of last Friday is that issue has been resolved and they will pay us, and they are processing all of the claims through March as we speak. And that we will not see one big check, but as each claim gets processed, they will start issuing checks. And again, we're going to get in the electronic transfer system set up with them so we can get the funds transferred to us electronically to expedite payments to us. With Molina, as I have up on the slide, and it's somewhat embarrassing to say, but they had an incorrect address for the facility. So they were sending remittance advices, which we were never receiving. And what we have found after the conference call this week is that we were not billing with the correct revenue code. Now, the question that I asked is, we looked in the provider manual to get information on what's the correct billing code to use, and there's no information provided by Molina Healthcare. When we call the claims department, we've been told that they cannot provide the information on how to properly bill a claim. Now, the provider representative that we talked with stated, yes, we understand that that's the information that's been provided. He cannot provide any justification or reasons for that, but he understands, and he is trying to correct the situation where we are going to resubmit claims with the proper billing code. He is coming by tomorrow to hand pick up roughly 35 claims, and they will be overnighted to their claims processing center in Long Beach, California, and he hopes to have the Molina payments made within 30 days. So we should receive approximately $800,000 within the next 30 days. I am hoping that we will receive a good chunk of the Health Alliance receivables within the next couple of weeks, but that remains to be seen. Again, as of today, we have not received any payments from either of the companies, but we are on this on a daily basis at this point.
Just a minute. Mr. Alex, I couldn't tell if you are finished.
Thank
or if
you.
had one more. Okay. Ms. Michaels and then Mr. Quisenberry.
I have several questions. Back to the slide before, it showed 800,000. Was that the total outstanding that Health Alliance and Molina owed? Or is that
Through
another?
March.
So through March from June
July.
of?
From
I know-
July of 2014.
So from July of 14 till March of this year, it's 800. And you hope to obtain about 700 of that, if I looked at the next slide correctly, within the
hoping-
next 60, 90 days, somewhere in that nature.
Health Alliance has said their goal is to pay us the receivables, $500,000 by the end of May. Molina says that they will pay their $200,000 but within 30 days, so that will be roughly middle of
Okay.
June.
Okay. So then we should only be in the rears with them if this all pans up around 100,000 is what you're hoping, right? Or around there? Or, and
It-
whatever's due this next month or two.
Contractually, both peers are supposed to pay us within 30 days. I'll be happy if it's within 60 days. So if we get caught up and they pay us through April, which I don't think is going to happen for another 60 days, that is what they're supposed to pay us. They're supposed to pay us within 30 days.
Yeah.
So again, once that train is running, we will increase our monthly cash flow by about $180,000 a month.
Okay, and that's the bottom line to that after everything's kind of caught up. And that should catch up your receivables too, correct? Okay, if I can ask another question too. Since this started back almost a year ago, July 1, what type of audit or, check and balance type things for receiving these funds? I mean, have you been working on this for a whole year to try to get these receivables and this money? Or did it just now kind of come to light?
Oh, no. Back in July, when you're only talking about 2 or 3 residents, the issue is not a high priority. But as the enrollment increased in November and December, it became a higher priority. And we were talking with both organizations. And again, with Molina, they have a lot of turnover within their organization. It was very difficult to find a consistent contact person who could provide us with good information on what was going on with their claims. With Health Alliance, they had repeatedly stated it was an issue with the patient credit file. Now, on a statewide basis, it was a common issue that all the providers have been dealing with all the managed care organizations across the state. So there's 8 total health plans. So we weren't the only ones that were dealing with this patient credit file issue. But again, the associations and HFS have been working to try to resolve the issue, and I could tell you that I would have weekly conversations with our association representatives telling them that this is a situation that is not changing, it's not getting any better. And again, probably until the last 2 or 3 weeks is when we finally are starting to see some action on this.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, if I can finish up here. I guess with people and with Medicaid and the other things that we rely on for income to take care of our residents and pay our bills, I think that staying on top of what is owed to the best of our abilities is going to be even more important coming up in the future. And so I don't know if there's some sort of audit to that sort of thing or whatnot, but maybe that's something we need to look at, somebody in charge of making sure that they stay on top of receiving our monies on a timely basis, even if we can't get them on time, to try to keep a running file, if you will, of what we've done to process that.
So the process that's in place, and this is something that we've talked over with Leading Age, our association, is that the providers need to forward any complaints or any issues that they're having with the MCOs to Leading Age, and then they're going to forward those issues to HFS. And so HFS has regular meetings with both representatives from CMS, the feds, because CMS has a vested interest in making sure that these issues are being addressed. So what I have learned is, and probably not an exaggeration, it almost seems like literally I'm the only one that's been complaining about these issues, because when I talk with Leading Age, and we've done presentations with Leading Age about managed care, other providers are having these issues, but no one is bringing these issues to the attention of the proper parties. So we are not alone in this issue, but it has been very difficult to get, obviously, resolution. And there's a number of other operational issues that we're dealing with, but obviously getting paid right now is the #1 issue that I'm dealing with.
Mr. Quisenberry and then Mr. Maxwell.
So I don't want to throw a stone from a glass house on accounts payables or accounts receivables, but you said net 30, and we started taking individuals on in July? Did I understand that correctly? They're supposed to pay us in 30 days?
Yes.
How does this program work from a standpoint of when did Health Alliance or Molina start receiving money from either the state or the federal government for this?
I'm not sure, but
Are they being squeezed too on delayed payments?
I'm not 100% sure, but because our traditional Medicaid payments are occurring on a monthly basis, I can only infer that the MCOs are receiving payments on a monthly basis.
So essentially, I hear this chatter around, but I think they owe us interest. Because, they've been holding on to the money and not forwarding it on. They've been receiving the public's money for this program, and they have not been paying the homes that have been taking these individuals in. Is that, am I exaggerating?
I'm going to have to take a look. I haven't thought of that issue about interest, and I'll have to take a look at the contracts that we have in place. But what I can tell you is with traditional Medicaid payments, because we are a governmental entity, we are not eligible for interest payments.
But there's an intervening private interest here.
I understand.
Who could be, forgive me if this is the wrong term, floating money over that time period and gaining from it at the public and these individuals' expense.
No, you bring up a very good question, and I'm going to follow that up and see where it goes.
Any more questions, Mr. Quisenberry? All right, Mr. Maxwell.
Of the approximately 5.3 million accounts receivable, roughly, if you can estimate that, what is, must be considered uncollectible debt?
I think for 2014, and this is what we're going to be reporting to the Board of Directors next month's meeting, is I think the number is going to be roughly about $280,000 for fiscal year 2014. So, and part of that is with some of the issues that we have with the Medicaid applications is causing that number to be higher than what we had anticipated last year.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Mr. Gima? Yes, Mr. Quisenberry.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Deb, how much do we pay Health Alliance a year for our health services for our employees? Just curious. You can rule me out of order, Patsy, if this is off topic.
No, that's quite all right. You want it on the public record, I understand.
It's in the $7 million range.
Any other pointed questions or unpointed questions? I have one clarification question, mostly for those who do watch our county board meetings. Over time, you have come to us and said that the state owes us approximately, or at least the last time you were here, $1.6 million. Now, these figures that you're talking about today, is that a breakdown of that total of 1.6, or the 1.6 is in addition to what you have been explaining to us this evening?
This issue with the managed care organizations is a separate number than what I've been reporting with the Medicaid applications.
Okay, then, just for the shock factor, what is the total amount of money, if everything fell out of the sky, that we are owed at this juncture?
About $2.5 million.
All right. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming this evening. We appreciate. Oh, you're not done? Oh, you're not done. Well, you did, and he wishes he were done after those questions. I am certain. Please carry on, Mr. Gima.
So, but it's a perfect segue, because the next issue is, on this slide, is the Medicaid applications. So we had 40 Medicaid applications at the beginning of the year. So we are roughly over 50. And again, the number is fluid because I think roughly we've actually seen improvement, as the last bullet says. We've probably had roughly about 10 to 15 applications that have been approved over the last few months. And so that's progress. But we still have a lot of applications that still need to be processed. The increase is due to a number of what we call community Medicaid residents that were admitted. So these are individuals who have been approved for Medicaid but have been living at home or in a supported living facility and has never been or never required nursing home services. So when they get admitted to the nursing home, there's an additional application that they have to go through, and basically it's just to make sure that there hasn't been any change in income or assets. They didn't make sure they didn't win the lottery that would, make them ineligible for Medicaid. But right now, we have roughly a monthly cash flow loss of about $180,000. As Patsy said, the number probably was about $1.6 million. Probably it's down to about $1.4 million or so. Again, it's always a fluid number depending on which applications have been approved. So there is somewhat of a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's still, I would call it dim. But again, I have a representative from HFS that I can go to try to help with the applications. And again, the communication that we're starting to see from the Decatur hub has improved, but it still takes time when we make an inquiry on a particular application, and it may take 2, 3, or 4 weeks before we will get a status update. So when you're talking about 50-plus applications, and it takes each one of those 3 to 4 weeks, it's going to take time. And again, the issues that we're dealing with is, in some cases, or The families also are not receiving an update, and we do have applications that are being denied because the families have not submitted additional financial information. And in some of those cases, those families have stated that they have never received additional request. And by the time that we do get that information and the application has been denied, the only recourse in a couple of these cases is that the family has to resubmit another application. And so what we're dealing with is if someone filed an initial application in January of 2014, and they find out in January of 2015, finally, that the application was denied, their only recourse is to file another application that will only go back 90 days, which means we are not going to get paid for January through September. And that's part of the reason why our write-offs are going to be higher than we anticipated. And again, I've made numerous inquiries with both the Department of Human Services and HFS. That 90 days is a federal regulation, and I'm being told that there's no exceptions, even though the problems are being caused by the states in the processing of the applications. And again, you know, unofficially, or whatever the case is, they will say, yes, they understand that they've had issues with the application process, but the regulations state that a Medicaid application can only go back 90 days, and we're not going to get paid in those cases for X number of months.
May I interrupt? I see Mr. McGuire has a question for you.
So if it takes a year, what are the deficiencies in the applications, and are we part of the process in helping them fill the applications so they're, you know, they aren't denied? And how do we help them make sure they aren't denied?
So that's the only part of the process that we have control over. We have, you know, the responsibility of filling the application is not it's not the legal responsibility of the facility. It's the legal responsibility of the recipient or their family member if they have a POA. What we can do is to try to help them as much as possible with the application process. We encourage them to submit them through the nursing home so we can make sure that the information has been submitted and we have the proper documentation to prove that all the documents have been submitted. Because we do have cases where the caseworkers have said, we cannot find the application or the documentation, and if we have proof that it's been submitted, sometimes we can keep those cases open. But in other instances where the family has said that they have submitted information, but they have no fax verification or certified letter that says it was submitted, we have no proof, or the family has no proof. So we do everything we can to get the application submitted, but once it's submitted, it's out of our control. And all we can do is make inquiries to the state. And again, over the last 2+ years, I'd call it going into the black hole, where we get absolutely no information from the caseworkers. That has improved over the last few months. But again, we have applications that go back to early 2014, late 2013, that we're still trying to find out what's going on with these applications. The vetting process that they go through is fairly complicated, but getting information or a status update has been the biggest problem that we've had. And it comes down to not having enough caseworkers to handle the volume of applications that they are having to process. So, again, what I was told is that when they started the Decatur Hub, they started off with 20 new hires. Out of those 20, none of the new hires had any previous experience in reviewing Medicaid applications. As of the end of 2014, they were up to nearly 100 caseworkers. But again, they said the orientation process is very slow because, again, it's a very complicated system that they have to use. So it's a slow ramp-up process, and they said, basically, be patient. It will get better. But unfortunately, we're feeling the growing pains of their consolidation of caseworkers to the Decatur hub and to the Chicago hub. And again, the Decatur hub covers all the nursing home applications south of I-80.
I don't see any more questions. Please continue.
All right, so this slide is the current number of, we're getting into staffing issues, retention and turnover rates. But in terms of the open positions, and I'm concentrating on our two main areas of concern, which is getting CNAs and food service workers. So and what I'm showing here is that the number of CNA open positions in terms of FTEs. So you can see in January was our low point at 28.8, and we've actually gone backwards with a need for 34 FTEs in February, but we have been making some steady improvements through April, where we're down to 30.9 open positions. And again, our goal is to have, if we could have all the positions filled, roughly 84.5 FTEs of CNAs is what our goal is. Now, that does not mean that we're working short with 30 FTEs. We make that up with either overtime, but also with agency use. But again, our goal is to try to eliminate agency use, and to do that, we would have to hire a total of 84.5 CNA FTEs. In dietary, our goal is to have 19.65 or just under 20 FTEs. We've been making, again, slow, steady progress in trying to get all those positions filled, and the 3.85 that you see are basically part-time positions, primarily to give better coverage on the weekends. So turnover rates, and what you see here is turnover rates for all the staff, nursing, which would include RNs, LPNs, and CNAs, and then specifically CNAs. And the three columns that you see, January, February, and March, is a rolling 12-month calculation of a turnover rate, which would be the number of separations divided by the number of employees in that period. So again, you can see that for all of our staff, or actually with all the numbers, we've actually been increasing our turnover rate. But again, if you take a look at the CNAs, that's probably obviously a big concern, because we've gone from 64% to 75%. And the benchmark, which comes from the American Healthcare Association, is 52.4%. And I can tell you that the goal that is being promoted by AHCA is trying to get our turnover rates down for CNAs to 45% by 2018. So you look at this, and the conclusion is we got work to do. And I would agree with that. But here's the but. Retention rate. Retention rate is the number of employees at a point in time who have been at the facility for at least a year, divided by the number of current employees at the time. So let's go to the CNAs. Our retention rate is actually improved. So we're now at 72.2%, and the benchmark is 67.5%. So I know, why is that? Our turnover rate is 75%. But our retention rate is 72%. Doesn't make any sense. What it does say, point number one, is if we can keep our people for 1 year, we're going to keep them for a long time. The issue that we have when we take a look at the statistics is we have a high turnover rate of individuals who have been at the facility for less than a year. And specifically, the turnover rate is very high for CNAs and even food service workers who have been there for 6 months or less. So,
Mr. Alex, you have a question?
Yeah, Scott, sorry to interrupt. Isn't that a direct consequence of the probationary period? I mean, don't we fire a lot of people on their 59 or their 179th day on the job?
we do have some terminations, but it's a combination of issues. I mean, if they're not performing, obviously, we can terminate them without cause during the probationary period, but we have a lot of attendance issues that come about in those first 6 months. We actually have some hires that never show up for orientation, or they never show up for the first day of work, or for whatever reason, they don't show up for their first week of work. We do a lot of vetting before hiring. We drug test all our potential hires. We know the other facilities don't do that. We will do background checks. We do a personality tests to try to get a good fit. So we try to do the best we can to hire good staff, but, you know, it's an industry-wide problem with these types of employees. But
I mean, if I can follow up a little bit. The statistics that are recommended, you're saying we're trying to hit targets that are sort of nationally recognized norms. Those norms actually include accounting for employees who, you know, fill out the application, get called that they're hired, and never show up for work. I mean, I'm struggling with why that kind of an employee would even be included in the statistics, because I'm not sure what that tells us.
all I can say is we include that in our statistics because those are hires. And again,
And those are included in the, I mean, we're keeping the statistics in the same way that these benchmarks are generated, that the norms you're talking about are
right.
generated.
Now, I can't, no one gives a breakdown on whether it's a no-show from, day zero or not. But I would assume that they do, but I can't tell you without 100% certainty that it is. But we know that that is an issue that we see with some of our hires, that they won't even show up for the first day of work.
And I guess the other thing I'm looking at is, are we being too aggressive at weeding people, or being so aggressive at weeding people out in order to get them out prior to the end of the probationary period, that we're essentially creating a problem ourselves? I mean, are we getting rid of people within the first 6 months who we wouldn't get rid of from the 6th month to the 12th month?
The terminations are done in strict adherence to our policies. So, in most cases, the terminations are because of issues of significant personnel issues, which would be things like, how they're treating the residents, for example. And there are certain issues that, just cannot be tolerated, that will be grounds for anyone for immediate termination. So, but again, a lot of the issues are attendance related, and again, you're not going to get good information from previous employers on previous attendance issues. And again, we just kind of wait and see what happens. But we're looking, despite that, we're always taking a look at our processes to see what we can do better. So what I have here in the slide is, one of the things that we're doing is we are currently trying to recruit a human resources director. And this is one of the things that we've gone through with our board in terms of trying to improve our performance measures. We're reviewing our orientation program to see are we doing a good job when they get out on the floors of getting them oriented to the floors and making sure that the staff is not doing anything to undermine the new hires. Because I can tell you that in certain cases, while on one hand, there will be complaints that we don't have enough of our own staff, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for employees to work more overtime. So if we would fill these positions, there's less opportunity for overtime, and we do have issues of undermining of new hires because of that. So, but we're looking at the orientation program to make sure that we have what we call CNA team leaders that have shown exemplary behavior and performance, and to make them these team leaders to try to provide a good mentorship for our new hires, so that maybe we can reduce, because the goal is to try to reduce our turnover rate at 1 year and under. The other thing is we have been really trying to get more exit interviews, and that's a tough thing to do. In most cases, we're never going to contact these individuals who decide not to show up, but we're trying to get some feedback on why they're leaving. And again, some of the issues are, they're not being treated nicely by some of the other staff. But again, it's just a very, very small sample that we're getting in terms of exit interviews, but we're trying to get some feedback from all the orientees to see what can we do better to get them acclimated into the building. So I want to back up.
Please continue. Oh, just a minute. Ms. Cowart.
I'd like to know, what do you do when you find out that an employee is sabotaging your employment rate? what do you do and how do you find these people that's doing this?
I can tell you that we probably have never disciplined anyone for that issue because, again, we need to have documented evidence, which would typically mean a statement from at least one, if not two or more witnesses. And getting those statements sometimes is difficult for this particular type of incident. So again, if it's hearsay, you know, if it's one person saying they did this or they overheard it, typically we can't do anything. We like to make sure that we have documented evidence before any type of disciplinary action is taken with any of our staff. So it means we have to have a witness.
Okay, you said that you do some kind of personality testing to see if they're a right fit for the nursing home. How do you do that?
So it's actually a quick 15-minute web-based personality test, and the traits that we're looking for, and again, it asks the applicant a number of questions that gleans a type of personality that they have. And so for each job position, we have certain personalities we're looking for. So at CNAs, it's typically we would like to have an empathetic individual who also will listen to direction in general. So, you know, and again, even if their personality testing does not show those traits, it does not mean that we will immediately disqualify them. But it will help us in terms of the interview process to ask certain questions based on the personality results that we have. So we don't automatically write someone off if they don't fit the personality that we're looking for, but it does provide us some insight on those individuals. And again, if you take a look at our turnover numbers back in 2008, we were having significant problems in retaining staff. Or if you took a look at our retention rate, if we were calculating it back then, we know, even though we weren't calculating it, that it was a big, big issue. And we've made significant improvements, but we still have more room to improve, without question.
Okay, please continue.
All right, so this slide is...
Sorry, I didn't see Mr.
I'm
Alex.
going to derail you one more time, Scott, and I'm sorry. I guess all I can say, seeing the turnover numbers and hearing this talk about morale issues and about employees maybe not being supportive of each other or sort of being, as Lorraine said, you know, sabotaging each other. I am not in a nursing home with enough frequency to be able to tell whether this is what's happening or not. But I would say that these are problems that, in my experience, have been indicative of workplaces in which the management is in their office with the door closed, and the rank and file is on the floor on their own. And so I would say, I mean, the only sort of thing I would like to see, I think, is I believe it's important that we bring some more HR management talent into the home. And I think it's critical that whoever that person is, I mean, I don't even know if that person should have an office. I mean, I want that person out on the floor, being in contact with employees and hearing these complaints firsthand. Because the fact that, you know, we have an employee who quits and said they were sabotaged, but, you know, nobody knew nobody could tell that was going on. I mean, I understand one person is not going to be able to do that for an entire nursing home and catch all the examples, but they're going to be able to catch some. And I think what it takes to get employees to feel like they are empowered in an organization is enough of a presence of management that they feel that they're going to see that person that day. They can walk up to that person and say, hey, I've got a problem, and they're not going to get fired for it. You know, they're not going to get disciplined for it. It's not going to get back to the person who complained, but it's something that manager is going to keep an eye out. But, you know, the management can't manage if they're sitting behind their desk or sitting in their office with the door closed. So I guess that's as I hear you going through this presentation, I mean, that seems to be the one, you know, common thread that I would be worried about based on this pattern of employee issues.
In the slide that I don't have in this update, but I did have last month, was we have hired a number of nursing supervisors. So we added a second assistant director of nurses position in this fiscal year. So, you know, we have a new DON that started in January. We filled the second ADON position. We have filled our every one of our nursing unit supervisor positions. So we have a unit supervisor for units 1 and 3. We have a unit supervisor for Unit 2, which is our Medicare unit. Both of those positions had been unfilled for months, actually years. Unit 4 and 5, which is our Alzheimer's unit, we just had our unit director there retire, and we're very close, and I believe, in filling that position. But we had a number of these supervisory positions that were not filled for a length of period of time. And so, Chris, what you've been saying is what we're starting to do now with our new nurse managers. But in addition to that, again, what I have in this next slide is, in talking with our board, we are going to recruit a human resources director to provide that expertise, hopefully get that missing piece to the puzzle for what we're missing in trying to retain these employees.
Oh, are you done? All right, before you continue, Ms. Bergson has a question. Your microphone.
I just have been told by so many people who hire people now that a lot of people who have no intention of working have to take jobs in order to keep their benefits going. And, you know, they keep a separate category for those because that's not really hiring and firing. It's just a scam.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Please continue, Mr. Gima.
So again, I'll back up real quick, and this is our agency usage through March. And so again, we have been able to reduce our agency down to $64,000 in the months of February and March. I can tell you, I think April is going to end up higher. It may be close to $90,000. And again, you know, as you've seen with the turnover numbers, we've had a higher number of CNAs separations in the month of April. But again, what I've heard in talking with our scheduler today is that today, probably for the first day in a long time, we have no agency staff in the building. So now, I'm not saying that that's going to be that way for the next few weeks, but we haven't had a day like that where we didn't have any agency in the building for, I can't even tell you when. And so, and the agency usage so far this month has been down. So I'm crossing my fingers that the main numbers will be much improved. Recruitment. So obviously we've got these open positions. So we have made a concerted effort to be much more aggressive in trying to recruit in addition to just putting ads out in the paper. So the Central Illinois Human Resources Group, I believe that's what that acronym stands for, had a job fair earlier this month. And again, I can't remember the number of different companies that were there, but there were 424 registered attendees. And of those attendees that registered, 158 had stated ahead of time that they were interested in talking with Champaign County Nursing Home. Tracy, our assistant administrator, was there, and she handed out over 150 informational packets. Now, we haven't had 150 interviews since then, but what I can tell you is that we have received an applicant for the HR director's position, and we actually hired a chef who's going to be one of our cooks, and it's been very, very difficult for us to find a cook. So that is a great hire that we've had, and especially someone who has experience as a chef previously. Just 3 days ago, we had an internal job fair at the nursing home, and it's the first time we've done that, and we had 20 attendees, and the majority of those were CNAs or people who were looking for CNA positions or food service worker positions. So that was a very successful job fair that we had. And so again, we don't have any plans just yet, but we are going to make this a regular event of having this internal job fair. So again, I know we'd have a number of interviews being set up because of both of the job fairs. I don't have any specific numbers, but again, a lot of interest. So I think it was very successful. Now on to food service. So what you have here is our Pinnacle monthly surveys. And again, to remind you, these are 15 random surveys that are done by telephone to family members every month. So keep in mind that it is, on a monthly basis, it's a small sample of 15, but Despite that, I would say you cannot ignore the trends that you see. And again, the food scores for food quality and dining service in the month of March are down. And probably the general trend that you see has not been positive for both scores. Now, obviously, this has been an ongoing issue that we've had that we continue to address. And some of the, if we want to call it more subjective data over the last month or so, is the fact that the number of complaints from families and residents that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks has shown a decrease from previous months. Now, the main issues that we're dealing with, or that we've been focusing on, have been with our food service company is supervision, recoupment and retention that we've just talked about. But in terms of specific meal service issues that we've had the most complaints about, number one is the accuracy of the trays, which means that if I ask for a hamburger without bun, the resident doesn't want to see a hamburger with a bun. And we have issues with accuracy, or someone who wanted milk but doesn't get anything to drink. Food temperatures. What we've seen here is we have plate warmers that have to go on a warmer, one warmer at a time. But you've got food service workers that try to do things faster, and they'll put 2 warmers or 2 plates on one warmer, and it doesn't work that way. And so they put that warmer that has never been warmed up underneath the plate, and that food will get to that resident cold. And the last thing is consistency in the daily food preparation. And I think despite the fact that the food quality score was down in March, over the last few weeks, we've seen an improvement in the consistency of the food preparation. So what that means in terms of consistency, you know, we're seeing slow incremental increases, but there's a variation that we see on any given day. You know, one day everything would be perfect, but then the next day we have problems with food temperatures, or we have a number of trays that were not what the residents wanted. Those issues are starting to show improvement, but again, we don't go through a week where we don't have issues, and that has to be eliminated.
Ms. Cowart.
You say you have a plate warmer. Most companies that serve multiple meals have those big old carts that keep the food warm. Do you all have that?
Yes, we have those too, but when you make a plate, those plates get warmed up, but then there's another warming tray that goes under the plate to keep those foods at the proper temperature. So by the time those plates get to the dining room, the food is still going to be nice and hot. So if that warmer that goes under the plate is not warmed correctly, that food is not going to maintain its proper temperature by the time it gets to the resident. And so, again, it's a very simple procedure, but again, getting the consistency. I mean, there's some food service workers that will do it, but then there's others that despite education and orientation will try to cut corners. And unless we're looking at them and watching them at that moment, they're not going to do it correctly. And those are the consistency issues that we're trying to ingrain with all our food service workers.
Mr. Gimush has one more question.
Okay, do you have meetings with your employees so that you can cover the different issues that go on? Because a lot of times, if an employee is having difficult, like with the food or with the patients there, you know, CNAs, they can get a chance to verbalize what they see as a problem so that you all can kind of correct that.
And this gets back to, it's not all the employees' issues. So what you said we're doing. We have periodic meetings, regular meetings with the food service staff. And some of the feedback has been is that they have not received proper orientation when they get into the kitchen. So that's an issue that we've been addressing with the food service management company to make sure that the proper orientation is taking place. And so again, it comes down to also getting consistent supervision. And so there's issues with the supervisors that we are also working with the food service management group to improve the consistency of the supervisors, because they have to hold the employees accountable. So they have to be consistent in what they're doing to make sure that the staff is also going to be consistent in what they're doing.
Okay, can you summarize the remainder of your,
Last slide.
excellent, thank you.
So, again, just an update on our 5-star quality rating. And so, and I'm going to apologize because I should have put in there, so what you have at the top is January and March of 2015. I should have added February because there was new rules or methodology that went into place at the end of February. And our overall star rating actually dropped to 1 star in February. And that's because our quality measure score dropped from 5 to 4 stars between January and February. But in March, we got our quality measure rating up. And again, in February, our staffing rating actually was down to 2 stars, and we were able to get that up in March. And the reason why, I think I mentioned this at the last quarterly update, is that we left out 478 hours of nursing time in submitting that to CMS at last year's annual survey. So those finally have been corrected. But again, the focus that we have here is to improve our 5-star quality rating because, again, besides the public, the hospitals, the MCOs are also looking at facilities that have a higher 5-star rating. And so our focus is on the surveys, and we are currently in our survey window. So we have been very aggressive in trying to prepare the entire building to get a better survey. And what we just finished doing, and I can say this now because it happened, is we had a mock survey. And so this was an unannounced mock survey that was done by an outside consultant. And again, I don't have all the data put together, but we're going to use any findings from the mock survey to improve our position for the actual survey. And again, last year we were surveyed, our survey took place in August, so we could see the surveyors coming in at any time. And so we're trying to do everything we can to improve our survey scores. Now, what I can tell you to date is we have not had any complaint surveys so far this year, and I probably just cursed the facility, but we have not had any. And again, complaint surveys would be residents or families or anyone making a hotline call to the state for any issues, and we have not had any of those surveys at the facility so far this year.
Thank you, Mr. Giemer. Are there any last-minute questions for his report? I just have one last encouraging comment, which I made before the Board of Directors, and that is encouraging you to work with the board to put together a cadre of retirees who can help advocate for these residents, especially in that subset which you described in great detail of their applications and following up on some of that and not hearing back on their applications and helping people who have trouble even filling them out. So that would be quite useful all the way around. All right, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, let's move back to the rest of our agenda here. Standing committees, Mr. Maxwell, the county facilities, you have one item on the agenda and you have one item on the addendum.
Thank you. I will remark that you all received a copy of my report for the Facility Committee meeting of May the 2nd, and I submit that for filing.
Thank you.
The first thing I'd like to move adoption of resolution number 9237, resolution approving direction for further action on implementation of the Sheriff's Operations Master Plan for Champaign County. You've all received it. It's in the package, and I move the adoption of that ordinance or resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell, and thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for the second. This is open for discussions or questions, especially for the chair of facilities, but for anyone else on that committee. Mr. Quisenberry.
Just want to make it clear that voting in favor of this is voting for the deferral of action with regard to this until financial plans can be made. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Did you have a comment you wanted to make, Mr. Maxwell?
No.
All right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right. Second motion, please, Mr. Maxwell.
Move the adoption of resolution number 9238, authorizing the award of the contract to Barber and Diatley for the courthouse window replacement project pursuant to bid 2015-003.
Thank you for the motion, Mr. Maxwell, and the second, Mr. Esri. Any questions on this contract? Ms. Cowart.
Is this window replacement for the old and the new jail?
No, Ms. Cowart, it's for the window replacements in the courthouse.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Is it for the old courthouse and the new?
The old portion mainly. I believe that's correct.
So were these the low bidders?
Yes. I don't have the exact figures with me, but the project did come in a bit under the engineer.
You have the
engineer's
bid
estimate.
results with the packet, with the addendum. The bid results is the last page.
Okay.
And this is under the, this bid is under what had been anticipated. The construction estimate was $209,700. So this was a bid below the estimate.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question.
Yes, please go ahead.
What year did we have those windows replaced?
Last time those windows were replaced was in the early 80s.
I thought we had it replaced at the time we built the courthouse.
No, because the windows were only about 15 years old at that time, so they were not replaced when we remodeled the old courthouse.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Esri.
Well, I was just going to say, if you look at the actual total bid, we're getting more out of it because we're getting the attic windows replaced. And the total bid is under the estimated bid, and the estimated bid was for only the main windows, I guess you could say. Whereas with this, we're actually getting the attic windows replaced too, and it's still under the budget, so yay.
At this hour of the night, we appreciate the cheerleading, and especially you're not on facility, so that's a good show. Any other questions or comments on this? All right, all those who favor this motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Excellent. Congratulations to the Facility Committee chaired by Mr. Maxwell. Now, Mr. Esri, it is your turn, and just a reminder, Mr. J pulled 2 items off of consent.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, I move, bear with me a little, the deferral till the June 2015 board meeting, county board meeting, resolution number 9212 on the consent agenda under B1, the ordinance number 962, which is on the regular action agenda, which is under B1, environmental land use, and ordinance number 963, which is B2. And if there's a second, I will speak to the deferral.
All right, motion by Mr. Esri and a second by Mr. Alex. Go ahead, Mr. Esri, please speak to
Okay.
your motion.
The reason for the deferral on the resolution, which got pulled, the resolution number 9212, in essence, gives us the authority to take and implement, you could say, adopt the ordinance number 962, and then ordinance number 963 is to basically kind of fill a loophole. Loophole's not the right word. Making some corrections, additions that we saw that had seen were being left out of 962. So without the resolution, we in essence can't adopt the ordinance, and we in essence can't adopt, we can't adopt ordinance number 962, and we in essence can't adopt 963 because 963 makes some additions and corrections to 962. And I've been informed that the resolution, we need 15 votes, roll call, and with only 15 members here, it would be nice to maybe defer it till we have more members present. So that's the main reason for deferral. It's, if I explained it well. We do have Mr. Hall here who can help
I was just going
speak
to
to it.
say if anybody has questions, I see Mr. Alex, but Mr. Hall, if you want to step up in case some of the questions are directed to you, or you're asleep. Is it, I thought you said it was Mr. Quisenberry, sorry.
You're perfectly clear, Mr. Esri. I don't know that a lot of talk is needed to choose to defer for those very clear reasons that we need to.
Mr. Alex.
I've got a point of inquiry here, and then I've got a question for Mr. Hall. What exactly which items exactly are being deferred?
Okay, the resolution under the consent agenda, B, under environmental land use, number 1, adoption of resolution, this is just how it reads, adoption of resolution number 9212, adopting authority to prevent water pollution caused by erosion and sedimentation.
Right.
That is the resolution that we need to pass to give ourselves, I guess you'd say the county board, the authority to then adopt the 2 action items
2 amendments.
of the ordinance number 962, amending zoning ordinance and amending the stormwater management policy, case 769-AT-13. And so that gives, the resolution gives us the authority to adopt that ordinance, and then the ordinance number 963 fills out some additional things that needed to be added to 962 that were realized in the hearings that the ZBA held due to input from, like, the city of Urbana, I know was one of them, and some other of the townships and such.
Okay, so I guess that leads to my question for John Hall, which is on resolution number 9213, authorizing a signature for the NPDES report. As I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've learned a whole lot about this in the last hour since Mr. J pulled this off the consent agenda, is basically we have to renew our NPDES permit. Because we have county highways that have ditches, the EPA decides that county highways with ditches constitute a sewer system, and we have to have a discharge permit for that. Am I with you? Are you with me so far?
Yeah, this is, it's not really the EPA, it's the Clean Water Act that established that. And so they are implementing the Clean Water Act.
But the NPDES permit is filed with the EPA, right?
That's correct.
Federal
And-
EPA.
Yes, and Resolution 9213, that's not a renewal of our permit, it's an annual report that we have to submit.
I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I was confused about. I was wanting to make sure that in order to have the permit, are we required to adopt this stormwater management policy, erosion control policy?
We need to adopt that in order to be in compliance. We should, by rights, we should have adopted that long ago, but nonetheless, it's before the board tonight. But you cannot adopt that until you have the authority to adopt it, and that's what this resolution is for.
Understand, okay, so there's not a conflict. 9213 could go ahead even in the absence of these other ones.
Yes, because if the EPA doesn't receive that report by June 1, we'll be in default of our
Okay,
obligations.
But we're not required to have this policy in effect in order to file that report, or, I mean,
Correct.
you
Yeah,
could argue
they're
that we're
separate.
required, that the EPA would say we should have had it a long time ago, but it's not holding up the filing of that report if we don't have that.
That's right.
And given that, is there any compelling reason that this should not be, that this can't be deferred? Other than that you want to get it taken care of?
We need to get it adopted. If there are not 15 votes tonight, and I would not want to bet on that, then by all means, let's defer it to
Okay,
next month.
I think that's a good bet. Thank you, sir.
Mr. McGuire? Oh, sorry. Okay, Mr. McGuire.
I have a question about these ordinances. So we haven't been in compliance for how long without these ordinances, and how long can we go without being in compliance and still not getting any trouble?
We first came under these requirements in 2003. And from my view, the EPA has been very accommodating because they haven't done a whole lot. However, we were supposed to have been audited this year. They knew that we were trying to get this ordinance adopted, and they did not want to audit until we have this ordinance adopted. Again, being very accommodating. So it's clear we have to get this ordinance adopted as soon as we can. With that being said, I still don't have a date specific for an EPA audit. They did audit all the other Champaign County entities this year: City of Champaign, City of Urbana, Village of Savoy, and the U of I. We're next on the list, but we do not have a date set.
Mr. Esri, just a moment. Ms. Busey has a few words.
I just need a point of clarification because the clerk and I are both not sure. The motion is to defer to the June county board meeting or the June ELEC meeting?
No, I thought it was the county board.
County board. Oh, we just want to be sure. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Mr. Esri, thank you for waiting.
Well, maybe this is out of order, but, I mean, I understand why Mr. Alex brought up 9213, but that's like the update that we've been catching up on. We've already approved, yeah, okay. But I know we still have the one motion to defer on the board, so.
Okay, are there any other clarifications on this motion, which is to defer the resolution and the two interlocking amendments connected with that resolution? All right, all of those in favor of this deferring signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. All right, noted, Mr. J. All right, would you move on to the next?
Okay, then I move adoption of resolution number 9213, authorizing county board chair signature of annual facility inspection report required for the MS4 stormwater permit with IEPA for program year March 2013 through March 2014. And it is in the packet. I will read it if someone really requests me to.
Thank you, Mr. Esri, and the second, Mr. Quisenberry. Are there any further questions on that? The discussion of that resolution sort of folded into the previous one, but if there are other questions of Mr. Esri or Mr. Hall?
No,
No.
I just realized, Aaron, as you read that, those dates are in fact wrong. They do not match the dates in the report. It is March 2014 through March 2015.
Okay,
So
we
I
need
move
to
it.
clarify.
The dates are correct in the report that will be submitted to the EPA.
Okay,
The
that's
motion,
the most important part.
it should have read at the end, IEPA for program year March 2014 through March 2015.
All right,
Instead
thank
of-
you. All right, let's get this corrected, so it's in the record correctly. All right, any other corrections, additions, questions? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Thank you, Mr. J. Yes, it does pass.
That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Esri. We have no action for highway and transportation. So moving on to areas of responsibility, finance, Mr. Alex. You have been waiting, I know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of resolution number 9204, authorizing payment of claims authorization.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Alex. And I was making notes. Mr. Rosales, any questions for Mr. Alex? All right, all of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, it passes. The next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move adoption of ordinance number 963, adoption resolution of 9205, authorizing purchases not following the purchasing policy. And I will note that we have an updated copy of these here and a very patient auditor sitting in the back of the room if anybody has any questions.
Second by Mr. Esri. Mr. Quisenberry. Well.
So I'm looking at the first one on this list for no purchase order issued.
Yes.
I'm curious, an interstate trailer, title and plates, that looks like a trailer, but why wouldn't that be a capital purchase if it's a vehicle? Because it's so cheap?
Really, honestly, that purchase wouldn't be on this list if it hadn't included the license and title.
Oh,
The license and title is $108. It would have been under your $5,000 limit. It would not have been on this list if they had not done everything at the same vendor.
okay. Well,
And
it
I
just
will
seems like
say
a pretty big thing to buy without doing a purchase order, so.
I asked the coroner exactly that. I said, did you get quotes? He got a really good deal on this trailer.
Okay, thank you.
And just so people at home might want to know what this is for a mass casualty event. Once it's outfitted, it will be able to hold up to 32 bodies. So it's rather dark to think about it, but it's something the county needs to have available.
I just want to note that I did not ask that question.
Yeah. I went there, I know.
Thank you so much, Mr. Farney.
I got to talk about that trailer for almost an hour, by God, I got to tell people about it.
It did wake everybody up. Ms. Coward.
Yeah, I was wondering about this here, the second from the last, about this, is this December medical supplies we're just being billed for?
Uh-huh, let me pull that one, I can tell you about it. It looks like we received that bill in late March, so that's why it ended up on the list for crossing fiscal years. We weren't actually holding on to the bill until after the fiscal year had closed.
Does that answer your question? Do you have more?
No.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Michaels.
Just real quick, I did talk to Mr. Farney earlier about several items on here and making sure that everybody turns their things in on a timely basis. And also, like the trailer, we've got a big truck here for 8,200 out of highway that did not have a purchase.
The GPS for highway, that's what actually got the updated list for you tonight because we received that today. The highway department simply didn't do a purchase order on it, so that policy says it comes to you folks for approval. What the highway department is wanting to do is to get this ordered, they need to pay half of it down to get the GPS for their trucks. If you would like to send it back to highway and tell them to go through their steps, it would get noticed.
Ms. Michaels, since you're on the highway committee, is that something you want to do? Okay, okay. Oh, Ms. Bergson, yes, please.
How many GPSs is this?
It is a total of 17 tracking devices, quarterly service, and installation.
Do you have a follow-up question?
No.
Oh, okay. Mr. Maxwell, yes.
I believe this is probably considered good management on the Highway Department's part, because this will allow them to track their vehicles and make sure they're being operated in an efficient manner.
All right. Anything else? No more questions. All right. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Okay. Moving on to new.
And Dwayne would love to show you all that trailer.
Well, they just had touch a truck, so maybe we could have touch a trailer, right?
Hopefully it'll be a while before I get to ride in that one.
Okay, I can see we're getting close to 10 o'clock and we're falling apart here. Okay, Mr. Alex, one more piece and it's under new business.
Thank you. I move adoption of resolution number 9236 for the approval and, if awarded, acceptance of Open Society Foundation grant for planning for Champaign County's pre-booking diversion options.
Is there a second, please? Second. Thank you very much, Mr. Harkey. Are there any questions for Mr. Alex on this new business? Mr. J.
Was there any matching funds with that grant?
I don't know. Does anybody know the answer to this question?
I don't believe so. It's a planning grant. It's very similar to the MacArthur Foundation grant that we applied for.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deb.
Any other questions? All right, all of those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Excellent, it's approved. A motion for adjournment. Mr. Esri, a second? Mr. McGuire, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much and have a good long weekend, everyone.